phenomenal fishing. Awesome fishing. That's putting out some crab.
Ooh, that was cool. 143 posts for 120,000 pounds.
That's $240,000 worth of product in about...
That's a lot of crab. It was easy. You got an extra guy, man. It made a difference.
This might be one of the most insane paydays in Deadliest Catch history. The crew caught $240,000 worth of crab in a single offload. That's 120,000 pounds packed into the Northwestern's tanks in just over 24 hours. And if that wasn't wild enough, Captain Sig actually let Edgar take the wheel for a full string. But none of this was easy. In fact, they were fishing on crowded grounds, dodging dangerous ice and pushing through injuries. So how did they manage to pull off a payday that big, and what went wrong along the way? The ice closing in. The Bering Sea was already rough, but now it was getting worse. The ice was moving in fast, and not just a little bit. Thick Arctic ice sheets were drifting down from the north, pushed by brutal winds. And when that happens, there is only one rule: get out of the way or get locked in. Once that ice traps your boat, you are done. You cannot fish, you cannot move, and you definitely cannot wait around. That's why every captain was watching their radar like a hawk. You could see it coming, not just cold weather, but walls of frozen ocean.
Let's see what you did, kid.
The Northwestern was right in the middle of all this. Sig Hansen was doing what he always does, balancing risk, timing, and crew safety while trying to find crab before time runs out. He had one big problem. They had not been able to catch any crabs. They were dropping pots, which are steel cages loaded with bait, and hauling them back up with nothing inside. That's bad for any boat, but it's especially tough when you are on a deadline. Crab fishing runs on a quota. That means each boat has to catch a set amount of crab before the season ends. Every day wasted is money lost. The crabs they were chasing were mostly opilio, which are also called snow crab. They move fast and hide deep. They follow food, temperatures, and ocean currents. And once the water gets too cold, they scatter or bury themselves in the seafloor. That's what the captains feared. If the ice chased the crab away, the season could end early with empty tanks. Time was ticking, and the crew knew it. On the Northwestern, you do not just worry about finding crab, you also have to keep everything running. Deckhands like Matt Bradley, Jake Anderson, and Edgar Hansen had to stay sharp. Their job is non-stop. First, they bait the pots, usually with chopped herring, squid, or cod. Then they slide the pots off the rail using a launcher. The pots sink to the ocean floor and sit there usually for 12 to 24 hours. When it's time to pull, they use a hydraulic crane and a massive winch system to bring the pots back up. It takes muscle, timing, and focus. And when the deck is icy or waves are hitting hard, it gets dangerous really quickly. That's the rhythm of crab fishing. Drop, soak, haul, repeat. But only if there is crab. At this point in the season, nothing was coming up. Empty pot after empty pot. The crew was getting quiet. That silence means one thing, that the frustration was building. You cannot fake a good haul. It's either there or it's not. And when it's not, the pressure falls on the captain. Sig was pushing the boat into new territory. He had not fished in these exact grounds in years. But with the ice creeping closer, he didn't have much choice. He knew the risks. Crowded waters meant more competition, more boats dropping gear in the same zone. That could mess with the crab's movement. If too many boats hit the same area, the crab could spook or scatter. But sitting still wasn't an option either. It was a gamble, and the clock was running. At the same time, the gear was wearing out. The more you haul pots in freezing weather, the more the hydraulics freeze, the lines snap, and the buoys crack. Not only that, salt water corrodes everything. The ropes stiffen up like sticks. Boots freeze, gloves get soaked, and fingers go numb. And still, the crew has to keep working. What's worse is that everyone was hurting. Edgar Hansen's neck pain was coming back. He has been on that boat for decades, and it shows. Years of lifting, pulling, and twisting in freezing weather. It takes a toll, no doubt. But Edgar is not one to complain. He kept moving, kept coiling line, kept helping bait the next set. That's the kind of work ethic you need on a crab boat. If one guy slows down, everyone slows down. Jake Anderson, who used to be the greenhorn, was now stepping up too. He was handling the deck with more confidence, and Matt Bradley, who was always quick with a comment, was focused. That's how you know things were getting serious. When even Matt is quiet, something is wrong. Out there in the Bering Sea, it's not just the cold you're fighting, it is the unknown. The ice, the missing crab, the mechanical issues. They can all hit at once. And when the pressure builds, mistakes happen. One wrong move with the crane, one mistimed throw, one missed line, and someone gets hurt. That's why Sig kept reminding everyone to stay sharp. This wasn't the time for sloppiness. Let's not forget what makes these crabs worth all the trouble. Opilio crabs are prized for their sweet, tender meat. They are one of the most valuable species in Alaska's crab industry. When the market is hot, they bring in a high price per pound. But that only matters if you can catch them. And right now, the Northwestern was still dry. To make it worse, the weather forecast was not looking good. Winds were shifting and the ice wasn't stopping. The crew knew that if they didn't find something soon, they might have to pack it in and move further south, wasting more time, more fuel, and more bait. And bait was another issue. Every time you reset a string of pots, you use up more bait, and you cannot just throw anything in. Crabs are picky. They want fresh scent, oily meat, something that pulls them in. If the bait runs low, the catches get worse. And with nothing coming up already, no one wanted to waste what was left. Sig was scanning his sonar and charts, looking for signs, water temperatures, crab migration patterns, and even old GPS data from past seasons. He knew there had to be crabs somewhere. The question was where, and could they reach it before the ice cut them off completely? Other boats were facing the same challenge. The Time Bandit was grinding all night, barely keeping up. The Kodiak and Ramblin' Rose weren't doing much better. In fact, most of the fleet was starting to worry. Nobody was pulling solid numbers yet, not even close. The Bering Sea doesn't care how long you have been fishing or how many seasons you have survived. It changes fast, and right now, it was pushing every crew to their limits. But then they found something, that lucky day. After days of disappointment, the tide finally turned. The Northwestern hit the kind of spot every crab boat dreams of. It was dense, steady, and full of big, legal Opilio crab. It didn't start with a big dramatic celebration. No one on deck cheered at first. They were just happy to see that they finally had a good catch. That one pot was not a fluke. The next one came up just as full, then the next, and then another. They had found the school, and not a small one either. This was the kind of catch that changes a whole season. These weren't scattered, half-empty pots like they had been pulling for weeks. These were solid, some with 800 to 1,000 pounds of crab inside, all legal-sized males, which meant they were allowed to keep them. It was clear they had landed right on top of a major crab pocket. Not only that, but the crabs were clean, healthy, and in perfect condition for selling. In just over 24 hours, the crew pulled 143 pots off the bottom of the Bering Sea. When they added it all up, the numbers were unreal. They had 120,000 pounds of crab loaded into the tanks. That haul alone was worth $240,000. And they didn't have to wait until the end of the trip to know it. Every pot they brought up confirmed it. The deck was covered in moving shells, the sorting table was non-stop, and the tanks below were quickly filling with seawater and live crab. You could feel the shift in energy across the entire boat. Jake Anderson was working the table, tossing crab down the chute one after another, checking size, tossing back the small ones, and moving fast to keep up with the rest of the crew. Matt Bradley had found his rhythm too. He was throwing bait, stacking pots, and working with a focus you only see when the catch is real. The whole crew was locked in. Edgar Hansen, even with his sore neck, was helping stack gear and shouting orders from the rail. They didn't have time to slow down. Once the crabs are found, the only thing that matters is staying on them. Captain Sig Hansen, as usual, wasn't jumping up and down. He doesn't show excitement like that, even when the numbers are through the roof. He was watching the waves, checking the ice reports, and planning the next move. He knew exactly what kind of haul they were pulling in, and he also knew that timing was everything. You don't sit still when the crabs are heavy. You adjust quickly, move pots, shorten soak times, and hit the pocket hard before it disappears. That's what he did. He shifted the strings, followed the movement of the school, and kept gear in the water without wasting a minute. When pots are coming up this full, everything on deck moves faster. The launcher slams each pot off the side with fresh bait. The winch pulls the next one up. The crane swings constantly. No one complains as everyone knows this is what they came for. But it's not just about hauling crab. They have to keep them alive and in good condition until they reach the processor. Below deck, the tanks were now full of crabs swimming in cold seawater. These holding tanks have to be watched carefully. If they get overcrowded or too warm, crabs start dying. That affects the total weight and the price. Edgar and Jake were keeping an eye on them, checking water flow, making sure everything was balanced, and counting down how much more space they had left. Once the boat gets near full, things get tense again. You cannot overload. You cannot leave crab on deck. You have to plan every pot and every move. Sig was calculating exactly how many more they could pull before they had to stop fishing and head back to port. The Northwestern is built for this kind of job, but you don't test its limits in these waters. You respect the boat and the sea. Even with the tanks nearly full, they kept pulling. The goal was to leave nothing behind. Once you lose the crab trail, it is almost impossible to find it again. And with the ice still moving in, there was no guarantee they would get another shot like this. While all this was happening, Sig let Edgar take the wheel for a short while. It was actually a test and not just a nice gesture. Edgar had been asking for more control, and Sig gave him that chance right in the middle of the busiest haul of the trip. Edgar did his best, steering while also watching the gear, trying to keep the boat stable through rising waves. He said himself it was going to take more than one string to get comfortable, but the fact that Sig handed over control at that moment said a lot. He trusted the team even during a record-breaking haul. They didn't need to say the numbers out loud. Everyone on that boat knew they had just pulled in something huge. The kind of numbers you only get a few times in a career. The kind of trip that makes the rest of the grind worth it. But what about the others? How much did they catch in that treacherous weather? Comparing the fleet. While the Northwestern was hauling in one of its best catches in years, the rest of the fleet wasn't doing nearly as well. That's the thing about crab fishing. When one boat hits big, it usually means the others are still looking. And for most of the other captains, this season had already started on the wrong foot. Some were battling the ice, others were stuck with an injured crew, and almost everyone was struggling to find crab. The Wizard had a decent haul of around 112,500, but it didn't come easily. Captain Keith had crew issues all week. 2 injured deckhands slowed everything down, and Lynn kept missing hook throws, stacking pots wrong, and putting others at risk. If not for the new guy, Roger, things could have fallen apart completely. He showed up out of nowhere, kept working through pain, and somehow earned Keith's respect. That says a lot. The Time Bandit wasn't far behind either, with 102,500 pounds. But they paid for it in blood, literally. Captain Jonathan threw his back out again after jumping on deck. He had been dealing with lingering injuries from before the season, but he still pushed through, coiled lines faster than the younger crew, and refused to stop until the deck was clear. It worked, but it wasn't sustainable. The Kodiak, though, was barely holding it together. They had only caught about 25 pounds, and most of the tension wasn't on deck. It was in the galley. 2 crew members nearly got into a fistfight over how to run the hydraulics. Captain Bill had to shut everything down and hand out contracts to keep them from throwing punches again. When you are wasting time managing egos instead of hauling crab, it shows in your numbers. The Ramblin' Rose was even worse, just 21,000 pounds. Their pots were light and their progress was slow. The Seabrook didn't even make it on the board. Engine trouble kept them docked the entire time. So yes, compared to everyone else, the Northwestern wasn't just ahead, it was in a different league. The conditions were brutal across the board. Ice was forcing boats into tight overfished zones. Air was freezing, bait was running low, and morale was falling apart. But somehow Captain Sig's crew kept it together. And when they finally hit that jackpot string, they were ready for it. When even more impressive was the scale. A full load of 120,000 pounds means 143 heavy pots, all sorted, stored, and kept alive in tanks. That's $240,000 in value, one of the biggest single hauls the Northwestern has seen in recent years. And it didn't take weeks. It happened in just over 24 hours. That's not normal. Even when you find good crab, it is rare to stay on them long enough to max out that quickly. It takes skill, speed, and discipline, not just luck. There are also rules that make this harder than it sounds. The crew can only keep legal-size male apelio crab. Everything else, including females, smalls, and damaged ones, gets thrown back. So even when pots are full, it takes time to sort and process them. And once the tanks are full, you cannot overload. Crab must be kept alive until offload, which means managing seawater temperatures, tank oxygen levels, and weight distribution the entire time. And still, the crew stayed sharp. Even Edgar, dealing with neck pain, kept working. Jake ran the deck like a machine. One thing not shown much but worth noting is that finding that many crabs also helps with quota. Boats are assigned a total catch amount per season. Hitting a big number early gives breathing room for the rest of the trip. It also gives the crew time to rest, reset, or head back out for other species. That flexibility is rare. So while others were struggling with arguments, breakdowns, and empty pots, the Northwestern was already counting one of the biggest paydays of the season. Who do you think is going to win the game next season? Will the Northwestern stay on top, or is another boat going to surprise us? Drop your predictions in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more updates from the Bering Sea.